Alright, I'm going to show how to disassemble and assemble new style diaphragms on a T100 and Q155 low. First, we're going to want to take off all the bolts and then put in our stud extenders. And as you can see, the 4 stud extenders go on each of the end bolts. Once you have the 4 stud extenders on, then we can pull the manifold forward. So once you pull the manifold forward, it allows enough room to be able to get in and change the diaphragms. Next, we'll show you how to take the diaphragm out of the diaphragm plate. First, we will be removing the 4 screws and then taking off the follower. Also, you're going to want to remove the old O-rings in the back of the follower. New O-rings are given in the diaphragm kits. Next, take the backup ring and pull it off like that. And then pull off the diaphragm. Next, using a pick, you're going to want to pick out the plastic plug in front of the screw. Then using a T45 star bit, taking out the center screw, which holds the diaphragm clamp to the bias rod. Now to pull out the diaphragm clamp, you can take one of the screws and put it back in. Screw back in to help pull it out. Now that we have the diaphragm out, depending on the diaphragm failure, we're going to want to look for if there is particulate or contaminants back here. Then we're going to want to, and right now we're going to assume that we see contaminant. I'm going to show you how to take the bias rod apart and how to clean thoroughly behind that area to make sure none of the contaminant has gotten back there. So we take this bias rod nut off, Also, I'd like to mention, before taking it off, you want to make sure this tang is in there. And once we reassemble, I'll show you that we're going to want to make sure that tang is in this hole. But just as a reference, you can kind of see right now that tang in the hole. And then we just can take and remove the entire bias rod assembly. So now that we pulled the bias rod out, just to show kind of what it looks like. So we have this cap, has 2 holes, and then we have the spring with a tang, and now that tang, like I had mentioned, goes in to one of the holes on the cap. Then pulling the spring off, we have the bias rod with the guide, and again, one of the other ends of the spring, the tang, will be going in and sitting in one of those grooves. Now this is to be able to hold and able to tighten the diaphragm clamp once it's all assembled, and that's what these tangs allow you to do. So to remove the diaphragm plate, there's 2 screws on either side, and just will remove that with an 8mm hex. Once you have both screws pulled out, then we pull the diaphragm plate forward. So here, we'll be showing you the overfill and underfill valves and how to change them out. As before, we can get to the overfill underfill when we pulled it out. What I have done here is pulled it all the way off and flipped it around to be able to get to it easier, and then also to show it easier. So we'll need a 10mm and an 8mm to pull these out. Using a 9/16 wrench, we then remove the air bleed valve. Now we're going to inspect the hydraulic valves for debris and function. First, we'll look at the air bleed valve. So we're going to want to look for any debris in around it, and also we can make sure that this valve is moving and it isn't stuck. Next, we'll look at the underfill valve. As you can see, there's some oil here. Again, we want to inspect for any large debris in around the valve, and the way we can tell is also by pushing this down. The oil will disappear, and that's the way we can tell, we know that it's functioning correctly. And then the last one we have is the overfill valve. Again, we want to check it for any debris that we can see, and then we can also take our pick and make sure that the check valve is functioning. And as you can see, the oil then comes down so we know that this one is functioning as well and the debris isn't blocking anything. Now that we have gone through one set of the hydraulic valves, next we will want to remove the rest of the hydraulic valves and then thoroughly clean the entire diaphragm plate.
Action.
Now that we have cleaned our diaphragm plate, this is a great opportunity to look at the cylinders and the plungers for any excess of wear. These, as you can see, have normal wear. We would want to look at the cylinders, and you can see with your fingernail that there isn't any excessive wear or scoring. Also, we can look at the plunger, and we'd be looking for any debris on the plunger. As you can see, these are in normal wear condition. If you did have any excessive wear on either the plunger or the cylinder, then you would want to go ahead and replace both. Now we will install our new hydraulic valves. We'll start with the air bleed valve. Goes in here. And it will be torqued to 75 foot-pounds. Next, we'll put in the underfill valve. And this one will be torqued to 30 foot-pounds. And then last, we'll put in our overfill valve. And this one is torqued to 105 inch-pounds. You're going to want to, before putting the diaphragm plate on, inspect and clean the gasket and replace if necessary. When putting the diaphragm plate back on, you're going to want to push it forward and make sure that the plungers all line up into the cylinders. And you want to kind of go a little slow and make sure they fit in there. Just like that. Next, we'll want to put in our bolts. And these will be torqued to 50 foot-pounds. Now we will be putting the spool valve and the bias rod back into the diaphragm plate. We want to take some oil and put it in the hole and then also on the spool valve. And when you put it in there, again, we want to make sure that it flows back and forth easily. Next, we have our bias rod. The new diaphragm is going to have the blue spring And then also I want to make sure we have the new bias rod, which has a 1 line indicator right here. So we put the spring on the bias rod and make sure that it is in one of the holes. The tang is in one of the holes. And then we take the cap and we can put that on there. And this too, we want to make sure the spring is in the hole fully. So once we have that, then we will take and put blue 242 medium Loctite. Just a little on. And then we put it back in the hole. And this bias rod cap will be torqued to 50 foot-pounds. And that's using a 30 millimeter. So the next thing we're going to want to do is take off the support ring from our diaphragm clamp. And while we're doing this, we're just going to inspect the diaphragm clamp not to have any sharp edges or debris. And then in the kit, it comes with another support ring. Also in the kit, we'll have the backup ring, the new diaphragm, screws, O-ring, and the screw cap plug. So make sure that we get this all cleaned up. And then the best way to install the new support ring is to line it up and kind of just get it, set it in there so that the round you can see fits in there. And then we flip it around and kind of just push it up and wiggle it in. And then before seating it all the way, I like to make sure the sides get pushed in and snugged. And then once it's kind of all snugged in there, then you can kind of take and push it against the surface. Kind of doing the ends first and making sure that, and then going all the way around, kind of using an edge of a table works good too, to making sure that support ring is pushed in all the way into the groove. When done, the support ring should be fully inserted into the diaphragm clamp and show minimal gap all the way around. Now we're ready to put the diaphragm clamp and the diaphragm back in. So we take our diaphragm clamp and just push it back on there. And then we have the screw, and this will also get 242 medium blue Loctite. And this is torqued to 20 foot-pounds. And then we take, don't forget, our urethane plug. Goes on top of the screw. And then we take the diaphragm and just push it on onto those bosses and make sure that it's in there pretty good. The next is we're going to take our diaphragm backup ring, and you're going to want to make sure that you can feel the kind of this parting line goes towards the diaphragm plate, and there will be a lead-in on the part that goes towards the manifold. And then we just put that in and make sure that it gets all the way into the groove, and the diaphragm and the backup ring sitting there nice and flush. Then we take our follower and put our new O-rings into the follower bores, and then each of these screws will also get 242 medium blue Loctite. And we're gonna get all the screws kind of set in there. And when we're tightening them down, we're gonna go back and forth to make sure that the follower pushes the diaphragm evenly. And kind of just get them hand tight. Making sure that the follower is nice and even. And then grabbing our 80-inch-pound torque wrench. Again, making sure that the follower is going evenly on to that diaphragm. And it will bottom out on those bosses, and then should be able to bring it up to 80 inch-pounds. Hey, I just wanted to give a close-up view of the diaphragm and the clamp. We're going to want to make sure before we put the manifold on that this is nice and flush into its groove. When we put the manifold on, we don't want it to have any possibility of pinching. So we really want to make sure that it looks like this right here, nice and flush, and the diaphragm back spring are in the groove. Now we're ready to put the manifold back on to the diaphragm plate. When we do this, we want to make sure we go slow and smooth to make sure we do not pinch the backup ring or the diaphragm. Now that it's forward, we're going to take 4 nuts and put them on the 4 studs just left. Now we're going to tighten those 4 nuts in a crisscross fashion to tighten up this gap. And we want to go a little bit at a time to make sure it goes on even. Now that you have your nuts on, we're going to torque them to 650 foot-pounds, starting in the center, doing a crisscross out.